The word innovation is often used to represent new devices or high tech objects. However, in today's competitive world, and particularly as we make our way through a global pandemic, organizations are searching to be innovative by identifying new ideas, new methods, new processes that's right, by you. So today, I want to talk to you about how you can be a change agent, how to innovate from within. My name is Katie Pritchett, and let's get started. So, this is what we'll cover today, just to define internal innovation, and we'll look at an innovation imperative. We'll also define entrepreneurs and how you can harness specific tools and techniques to bring forth ideas into adoption within an organization. We would be remiss if we didn't also tackle this from the managerial side. So, what can leaders and managers do to help ensure that those ideas get implemented? And we'll wrap up and do some Q&A. So, let's get started on what's innovation anyway? Let's look at this definition. I mean, we can call it a verb, or we can do whatever, but what I really want to call your attention to is the novelty piece is there. It's got to be new. It's got to have utility. And of course, it's at the nexus of also being implemented. If we don't have that utility and we aren't able to experience the innovation, if it's not at the nexus of these three. And so we're looking at introducing something new or to affect some change in. So that's the definition we will work from when we talk about innovation and innovation from within. Now, the idea that it is time for organizations to innovate, it's not new at all. In fact, that rhetoric has been around for a while, and I just have some snippets from reputable sources. You can see Forbes, Harvard Business Review, The Economist Technology Quarterly, and most recently from McKinsey and Company. You can see this spans almost the last decade, this imperative that's out there, that it's got to be now. The time is now. Time is of the essence. I mean, look at the dates, right? Well, this isn't new news, but we do know that the world, the more global, excuse me, the more global we've become as an economy and more competitive, yeah, status quo will not stay. And so here are some examples of companies you may have been familiar with, because within the past 2 decades, most of these companies that were innovative for their time have gone bankrupt or been acquired. So let's look at a couple of these. So Kodak, for example, Kodak was actually the market leader in photography and in film. A lot of people think that Kodak's demise is because they did not move into or invent a digital camera until later. But in 1970, early 1970s, they did, but they kept it on the shelf. Kodak didn't introduce their digital camera until later in response to competitors who had put them out on the market. So they were late to market, and even after they had brought their digital camera in, they folded that unit into their customer products unit, and it languished. Because think about it. Think about how you experience photography now and how you use it to communicate and how it's a part of your daily life, that it's not a transaction or just a product that could be put on a shelf or in a specific area, but fully integrated into your lives with communication with social media like Snapchat. And so what photographs now mean to us and what that process looks like. Now, Blockbuster is interesting. They failed to innovate with their digital because they were looking at they had a lot of overhead, a lot of sunk costs invested in those big pieces. And they were looking at DVD postal services and early streaming that were coming on the market. But to compound that mistake, due to their market position, they were not believing that the fledgling company Netflix would do what they did. In fact, Blockbuster had a chance to purchase Netflix and on a couple of occasions and decided not to. If Blockbuster had launched a streaming service even 2 years earlier, Netflix may not have ever happened. And then even the decision to not acquire, and Netflix at one point was ready to sell 49% of their shares and take on the Blockbuster name, and it didn't happen. And so what we're seeing with these stories is this inertia, this idea that someone knew something. The competitive landscape was there, and maybe there were some squeaky wheels, some innovators within, but ultimately this has happened over and over again. And that's what we want to prevent, right? We really want to incentivize this ability for people, for change agents to use an entrepreneurial mindset within an existing organization. So I'd like to share with you a book that recently came out in 2019 called Driving Innovation from Within. It's one of the best that I've seen with the good data and actionable steps. So here's how this book is set up. So there's this myth, right? There's this myth that there's this innovator or entrepreneur who is typically young, gets an idea in college, moves out west, gets a garage, maybe a couple friends, builds a solution, and becomes a billionaire overnight. Come on, y'all. Like, that's outlier stuff. That's not typical. And so this book really breaks down what this looks like. And this is so fascinating. So the author recognized, so in that PBS did a special called the Nightly Business Report, where they had been on air for 30 years, and they wanted to look at the 30 innovations that have changed life most dramatically over the past 30 years. So they looked over 250 sectors, almost 1,200 nominations of innovations to look at, and they got a panel of experts to whittle it down to 30 of the best innovations, the ones that have been the most impactful for us over the last 30 years. And what happened is, of the 30, the truth compared to that myth is quite different. The vast majority of the innovations that have had an impact on society were conceived by employees, y'all. 73% were from intrapreneurs, employees from within existing companies, not entrepreneurs. These people pursued their innovations often later in life in small teams and in broader communities, but within the context of large organizations driven not just by profit, but by a passion to make a difference. In fact, only 8 of the 30 most transformative innovations were first conceived by an entrepreneur, where 22 of the 30 were conceived by employees. They're giving us that 73%. And so without their inventiveness, we may not have a mobile phone to reach for, or an internet to connect it to, or an email to send, or hey, if we got sick, to be able to get an MRI. All of these impactful innovations, again, from within. So the context, though, is important, and we can look at that with COVID right now. COVID-19 is presenting us globally with a crisis we've not seen before, and you can look at these numbers. McKinsey and company released these in April of this year, and the story that it's telling is that executives at the highest level in the C-suite are strongly believing that they'll return to some innovation-related initiatives after things have stabilized. But look, they have to weigh cutting costs with driving productivity. So go with me here, if there's less budget to hire outside firms, then maybe the innovation has got to come from within. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack, but let's go ahead and talk to you who's in this session, because you're interested in being a change agent. You're interested in being an entrepreneur. So what are some actionable steps that you can take? Well, first, we've got to think about idea generation. Where does that idea come from, that novelty come from? So let's look at the first thing you can do as an entrepreneur. The first is to think big. The value of entrepreneurs begins with a deep understanding of your organization and the unique challenges that companies or organizations of any sort, nonprofits or student orgs, um, what do they face, right? So in order to become more entrepreneurial, the first step is to spend ample time researching, understanding, reading, talking to people about a specific problem to have insight into. What is the competitive landscape? Where are users or clients no longer finding value? Spend time getting to know your department's unique pain points in the larger scope of the business. Look at your boss and your boss's boss, if that exists, and understand what are their goals. What is your functional area need or is lacking that another functional area may have? Build your user knowledge. Understand the big picture so that you can get resources to support your ideas. And after all, it's easier to sell later if we understand that the efficiency, the new process, the new product, the new way of organizing a business model, how the organization can make money or keep people engaged, if you can align that to the larger mission and the larger goals. So we think big, and then we need to look inside out. So inside out means that, okay, so first, both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs alike must apply qualities like passion and empathy, critical thinking, and collaboration, so that we understand that those attributes cut across. But we want to look at our own areas of expertise. Where's your domain knowledge? What hacks are you doing at work that are helping you to be more efficient? And can those efficiencies help another team? And if so, then expand your knowledge outside of your day-to-day team. Because this means if your area of expertise is a starting point at tackling a specific challenge, then we can see if it can translate. How does it translate to another area within the organization? Because if we can scale cross-functionally, then new opportunities could arise company-wide, organization-wide. So inside out, we've got to let this organic thoughts of expertise start to bubble up and start to change from within. Now, we've looked at some attributes that cut across both intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs, and one of those has got to be our comfortability with the F word, failure. We've got to have productive failure, iterative innovation, setbacks and learnings, whatever you want to call them, that's got to be inherent. It's part of the process. So it's truly not failure if we're continuing to learn from it. To me, it's failure if we stop learning. So if you want to be entrepreneurial, you can't be afraid to experiment and to try things out. You've got to recognize that this is stepping stones on the path to making some shifts. So when we think of disruptive thinkers, when we look at change drivers over history, your company will need these skills to weather market shifts or to meet a new customer's demand, or to help change the user experience so it's more seamless. These things are rarely nailed on the first time. So understand the creative paths that can help you and your team stand out in this type of business environment, whether it's using automation or digital, or sometimes we think we become overly anchored to the idea that it's got to have technology. But maybe we look at the flip side and we think about more simplistic, or we look at the opportunity to pare it down. Sometimes where we want to bundle, or make things higher tech, but sometimes the simplicity. So what does that look like, right? Experimenting with different levels. So, and if you want to position yourself as a change leader and as an intrapreneur, someone who's really excited about challenging and complex problems and being a problem solver on the team, we've got to build relationships. It's really important that you leverage your relationships on your team and that you hone empathy as a problem-solving approach. So if you are scaling or working with a cross-functional team to see if those efficiencies can be realized and it's not working, don't throw the process away. Ask why. Get to the heart of it. Help to understand what's going on with that team and how those efficiencies are or not working, because in and of itself, that's a learning mechanism that can help you then scale the idea at a larger level. So, actionable steps that you as an individual can take. Now, what's interesting is this is a women's summit, and so I want to be thoughtful about discussing women in particular in leadership roles and what those attributes around entrepreneurship look like. And so I wanted to share some data with you. There was a consultancy firm, Zinger and Folkman, who collected 450,000 feedback instruments when they did 360-degree feedback from almost 16,000 leaders across the US, from whom 2/3 were male and 1/3 were female. Each participant on average received 13 respondents, so including their manager and direct reports, so 360-degree feedback. And because of the large sample size of this study, their difference shown is statistically significant. So what I want you to see is that that women were just as, if not more, effective in the organizational leadership role. And so I want to translate this to entrepreneurship, right? So let's think about this. About 6.9%, which is about 7% of Fortune 1000 companies have female CEOs. Those leaders generate 7% of total revenue of organizations on the list and outperform the S&P 500 index over their respective tenures. So then what are the work qualities? What are the attributes then that distinguish those innovative approaches? That's what I want to look at. Well, here are 16. So there's 16 of those competencies and attributes that were studied from this data. And of those, women scored higher than men in 12 of the 16. And so look at those. You can also see which ones are statistically significant. And we can look at things like taking initiative, displaying integrity, and honesty, driving results, practicing self-development. You can start to see these, right? Building relationship, inspiring others, collaboration, establishing stretch goals. So while you might not be surprised about a woman's nurturing competencies, it is clear that women also lead the way in areas that are vital for successful entrepreneurship, just given what we just talked about. And so female leadership behaviors drive openness and change. If that's what we are focused on in a modern organization today, this idea of speed, agility, experience, technology, responsiveness, customer centric, these are things that are hallmarks of today's modern organization, then this is reflected in these types of attributes. Now, again, this is data distinguishing the difference between male and female, but anyone can possess these. And so a woman's ability or anyone's ability to be compassionate or to think more holistically can support a broader talent pool to drive consumer needs and think innovatively. So any leader, right? And so what we're seeing bubble up in the green based on this data is that as more women or as more people take on these entrepreneurial roles, these are the attributes and the characteristics that we'll start to see, the competencies that we'll see being recognized to drive results and champion change from within. Let me tell you a story to highlight some of these competencies and some of this as a story to help bring this to light. So being an entrepreneur and an innovator means that you're working with an established organization, right? And it helps you to potentially scale more quickly. So here's a story about Heather Davis. She was a senior managing director at TIAA, a leading manager of retirement funds. There was a 45 billion private equity fund that Heather helped to build. And because of that, they were the largest owner of wineries, farms, and other agricultural real estate. By investing in agricultural real estate and the technologies to increase farmer productivity, she was pursuing a mission to help prevent a world food crisis. So a very much social impact right there but that was part of the business. But when a lot of farms started to underproduce and were having trouble recruiting workers and recruit a high turnover rate with workers, Heather and her team are like, y'all, this is not working. This is not operationalizing in the way and the efficiencies we want to see. And so Heather flew over because she said that she believed that the answer would actually be in the field, literally in the field rather than in the boardroom. So she flew over and she actually went out into an apple orchard and observed workers carrying heavy loads and performing repetitive tasks. Heather also happens to be the mother of an autistic child. So it became immediately clear to her and evident that, hey, this work in an apple form is ideal for people with autism. So she launched within TIAA, she launched an effort that is named Fruits of Employment, the Fruits of Employment program, which strategically employs people with autism and other disabilities at agricultural sites, such as orchards or vineyards. And so by doing this, TIAA not only benefits society and they're also their business. And Heather was able to achieve instant scale because she was able to use the resources and the structure of her company. She was able to achieve a level of impact that she might not have, that might have just been that might have taken her years to achieve on her own if she were to start an independent nonprofit or an independent business. So let's look at this. She thought big. She knew the goal of the business, not only to get that portfolio to grow, but also to address a social issue for the world. She acted on expertise, both professional and personal. As a mother, she experimented and built relationships so it could scale. So I'm hoping that this story is one that can be inspiring for you in that idea generation area. Now, we also know that it's not just about sparking the idea, but we have to have adoption throughout the organization, that idea of implementation that I had mentioned earlier. So if you're a junior employee, of not of the stature that Heather was, but if you're a junior employee, Rita Gunther McGrath, who's a consultant author and has a TED Talk out there, has used and coined the term of finding a Sherpa, finding someone within the organization to champion this idea and help to navigate the political context and the social capital context that might need to happen within an organization. So a Sherpa, if you're not familiar with mountain climbing like I wasn't, but Sherpas are people who are highly skilled and experienced climbers, often in the Himalayan mountains. They're paid to do things like prepare the route for climbers, to fix ropes in place, or to carry things. So true champions, like truly preparing the way. And so if you like that analogy, then you can use it. And if not, you can really think about the champion idea that Nicholas Bry writes about in his book, The Entrepreneur's Factory, that came out recently. And Nicholas Bryce says that, hey, if you are maybe a junior employee and you're looking to get someone to help you get a larger scale adoption of your idea within the organization, you've got to find the right person. And here are some things that you can use, 6 questions that you can use to vet that person and to find that person. So it's on the screen. I don't need to verbally go over them, but where we're looking for the competencies we're looking for mirror some of the things we already looked at. But we are looking at people who have visibility to the executive level, who've got a passion, who are not afraid to advocate, people who've got a strong network, who are willing to spend time on your idea and to remove obstacles, this problem solving, if you will, driving change, some of those characteristics and competencies that we saw earlier. So helping you to identify that champion is going to be really important as an entrepreneur. That will be something that you will need to do. So we've got idea generation, and then we're moving to idea adoption for the organization. Now, adopting and change is not easy. In fact, organizations sometimes are meant to just survive, and change can sometimes feel like a threat to that. So let me just do a very quick exercise, very quick. Stand up if you can, and if not, sitting is okay. But stand up if you can and do this. Just fold your arms. Fold your arms for me, like whatever is comfortable. Now that you're comfortable, what I want you to do is uncross your arms and 180 degrees, do it the exact opposite way to fold your arms. So, uh, uh, try to do that and settle in. If you're standing or sitting, how does that feel? Maybe you're still even trying to figure out where to put your arms, right? And if I do this with a live audience, I see that as well. And people are laughing or they're saying, oh, this is so awkward or uncomfortable. Yeah, because change, even good change, can be uncomfortable. And that's where we have to be mindful of barriers in organizations. So we can experience barriers to our entrepreneurship, both on a structural level or on a cognitive level. We might experience it culturally or with action. So you can see them falling into different buckets here on the screen. And I want you to be mindful of that, because an entrepreneur doesn't expect an easy path. An entrepreneur knows that resistance will come. It's how you deal with it. So we have to know that there's got to be some of this, and that's why that idea generation and the adoption is going to be so important. Now, I do want to shift, as I mentioned earlier, we'll shift to the managerial side of things. So when you are a leader, when you are a manager, what can you do to help break down some of these barriers and address some of these barriers? And I also think it's quite appropriate. Last summer, this was the front cover of the Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about artificial intelligence and bringing AI into organizations. But look right there on the cover, y'all. Look at that arrow. The main challenge isn't the technology, it's the culture. And so, okay, managers, leaders, and future managers and leaders, let's talk about that. If it's your goal to then develop a culture of innovation, here's tip one: make the group the guru. Bring the people on the front line who are doing the daily work into the fold. People are way more willing to accept the change that they're a part of. So make sure that those ideas are heard. Allow that idea generation to happen organically and invite it from within. Now, once we've got ideas on the table, okay, ideas are great, but we've got to act on ideas. Ideas without action aren't going to get you very far. So the next step in the strategy that promotes entrepreneurship is to dedicate an appropriate amount of resources. That could be in the form of time, budget, skill set from your team to properly start on this. There are large companies like AT&T, Google, LinkedIn that have their own internal incubator programs to foster innovation. And a surprising innovation incubator example you might want to emulate comes from Whirlpool. Whirlpool claims that most of their ideas come from structured ideation sessions that they allow and open up to employees, and they foster basic business case formation and competition, some good healthy internal competition, testing and experimenting and allowing failure to happen so we can learn and move to large scale commercialization. So those are some formal things that you might be able to institute into the structure for acting on ideas. And it's got to be a safe place to learn, right? Or fail, but failure and learning go hand in hand. And so we have to allow people to take those risks without fear of retribution. So we've got to maintain accountability, but how can we incentivize and encourage people to try? Well, one tip that you can use is to put it in a job description and or put it in a performance evaluation. I like to think of two specific prompts that leaders can have when they do a feedback session with an employee, or if you're doing a performance evaluation. Ask your employees, tell me about something that you tried that didn't work, and they should have something. And the second part to that question is, what did you do after it didn't work? Now we're getting to the learning phase and really starting to think about that scale and putting ideas into action. And the last thing is to understand that resistance will happen. It is a natural part of the change management process. And so, as a manager and a leader, what will you do to actively change and address? And calling it out and noting it's structural or noting that it's cultural and what you can do about that resistance will be really important, that you set the tone from the top. So I know we're short on time, but I'm hoping to leave you with a little inspiration. I think that this captures the essence in a very eloquent and simplistic way of what I was just speaking about with the managers. If you take a moment to read that. And the people all remark, we've done it ourselves. And so we'll put a wrap on this and looking forward to your questions. But just a reminder that only about 7% of the US population will become entrepreneurs and start new businesses or new products. But y'all, in the past, history's shown that 73% of the most impactful innovations has come from intrapreneurs, innovating from within, from employees. We're now at a point with this global pandemic that organizations are being invited to, and maybe even existence being threatened by not innovating. And so there is a stage set for someone like you. Innovators play a role, and there are actionable things that you can do, and there are actionable things that managers can do to foster this. And so I'm really excited to invite your questions because I want to hear from you, change agents. What are your questions and what are you thinking about? And how can I support you so that we can all be better and be innovative? Thank you.